It's episode 225 of the Author Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Thanks for joining me like you do every Tuesday and Friday for new shows, bringing you the very best in author interviews from around the writing world. Today's guest is Walt Williams. This is a fantastic interview. I think you're going to love it. Right before the interview kicks off, I've got a special little segment I'm going to bring you. We have introduced a new way that you can interact with the show, and there's a phone number. It's 209-73-BOOKS. That's 209-73-BOOKS. If you can't remember that, there's a link in the right-hand sidebar of the site where you can also subscribe. If you'll call that number, you can leave a voicemail and tell us what you think about the show, maybe a comment about a previous guest. Maybe you want to interject something into the conversation that we didn't cover. Whatever you would like to submit, call, leave us a message, and you just might get it played on the show. I've got one right before the interview starts that are going to play from Reese, and I think you'll enjoy it. I'd like to tell you about some sponsors that I'm very happy to have today. Pico's House. Authors, if you're looking to take your book to the next level, you need to talk to my friend Crystal Pico Watanabe from Pico's House. She offers developmental editing, line editing, beta reading, and proofreading. She will soon be launching a book interior design service, print formatting, but you can inquire about that now if you're interested. She's edited over 70 novels and novellas and 130 short stories, and she comes recommended by best-selling authors such as Hugh Howey and Samuel Peralta. Most of her experiences with science fiction, speculative fiction, and middle grade fantasy, but she enjoys all genres and would love to talk to you about your book project. She offers complimentary 2-page sample edits and complimentary track changes review after the edit. Visit picoshouse.com and let her know that you heard about it on Author Stories, and she'll give you a discount. That's PIKKOSHOUSE.com. Galactic Satori Chronicles, written by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks, is a raucous sci-fi adventure introducing Asher, a young man whose world is turned upside down when he discovers that his fiance's death has been directly caused by an imminent alien invasion. He and his friends channeled his anger and grief into the ultimate weapon against alien technology. Human emotions were the one thing the Kron didn't account for when they started their attack on Earth. Book 1 Earth and Book 2 Kron are now available. Galactic Satori Chronicles. ThirdScribe.com has recently released their newest update, and it is amazing. Authors, you need a platform to showcase your work and to connect with readers. Readers, I know that you like to connect with your favorite authors. ThirdScribe is the place to do that. Go visit ThirdScribe.com, check out the all-new features, and give it a shot. ThirdScribe.com. There's a new anthology coming out called Oceans, the anthology put together by our very good friend Daniel Arthur Smith. If you remember Clones from last year, it's in the same series, The Frontiers of Speculative Fiction. You can pre-order it right now for 99 cents. This book is amazing, and not just because I have a story in it, although I do. 12 different authors bringing you speculative fiction, underwater cities, lost civilizations, crops, climate change, and dead zones. In this collection of ocean-themed stories, 12 of today's top speculative fiction writers explore our morality, our built-in societal restraints, and reflect upon our state of grace. The waves roll in, the waves roll out. Oceans, the anthology, pre-order it now. It releases September 26th, but you can get it for only 99 cents if you go pre-order now. There's a link in the show notes. Every Thursday, I read cool comics in my collection. It comes out from Ed Gosney at edgosney.com with over 100 episodes in Ed's collection to date. There's always something new every week to point out something about comics that I didn't know. He highlights what he's collecting now, maybe some things he collected in the past, and always has a great story tied around them. Go check out cool comics in my collection at edgosney.com. Tears of Heaven, Flames of Perdition, Book 1 by R.A. McCandless. A child of angels and demons, Dell is a sarcastic, fast-talking, dangerous, and unpredictable demon hunter. She and her partner Marin take their orders directly from an angel. They obey or they'll be destroyed. It's not the job Dell wants, but it's the job she has. Normally, banishing a rogue demon back to hell wouldn't be a problem. Dell and Marin have a few centuries of experience. It's all part of the job description. But when the angel orders them to take down 3 demons at once, the job goes from bad to worse. The demons, with supernatural powers and their own agenda, have kidnapped children for their own nefarious ends. With angels breathing down her neck, children to save, and demons gunning for her blood, Dell is running out of time. That's exactly where she wants to be. If you're a fan of the Dresden Files, give Tears of Heaven, Flames of Perdition, Book 1, a shot by R.A. McCandless. Stay tuned after the show for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series. Thanks for listening. Okay, we're going to jump into our interview with Walt Williams. I think you're going to love this show. But before you do, we've got a message from listener Reese. And I'm saying Reese with air quotes. You can leave your own message at 209-73-BOOKS.
I saw your ad about asking people to leave opinions about books and things, and I think I'd like to leave my opinion about books. My name is Reese. I read a lot of books on the Amazon. I got one of them Kindles, and I love to read books. And I was thinking, I've seen a lot of these writers like Michael Bunker, Jason Ansbach, and that other guy. What's his name? Brandon Sanderson. I've seen them writing books, and they're okay, but I know I could write better. So I like listening to your book podcast there, telling people how to do it. Seems pretty easy, considering most of them, seem like dummies. I could write far better than them. So I love the podcast. Keep doing it. And don't let me get in the way or anything. But if you have a moment, I'd like to send you my book. It's The War and Peace of the DMV, for which I worked at for 34 years in Arkansas. And it's basically a big, long, sprawling epic about a boy who's full of cockeyed optimism, and he starts at the DMV, and he gets caught up in the game of power and politics, and for all the wrong reasons. And in the end, he learns that he should have done things right, stuck with his professional calling of bowling. So I want to really turn this story into something. I can see it being a movie with, like, Matt Damon and that girl that always says those crazy things about how Trump is a maniac. I voted for him, though. He's pretty great. But I like her anyway. She's pretty and everything like that. And she could play the love interest. And, I was thinking maybe, possibly, perhaps, being the writer and things like that, I could have, like, if I was on Hollywood and I was on the set and my movie about the DMV was getting made, like maybe her and I could have a relationship. I think her name is Jennifer Lawrence. Yes, that's right, Jenny. Is there any way possible that you know her and you could introduce me to her and I could work on a script with you, Hank? I could cut you in. We could work together. And then if Jenny and I were ever to buy a place, move in together, you could come over for dinner any time. Anyways, Hank, keep going with what you do there, Mr. Garneman. You're a real good soldier in the war, and when the revolution comes, I don't think your head's going to get cut off. I think you'll be cutting off the head, sir. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that, Reese. Now on to our show with Walt Williams. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to bring you a show with Walt Williams, and Walt has a brand new book that is coming out, I believe, today when this episode airs. It's going to drop, and the book is called Significant Zero: Heroes, Villains, and the Fight for Art and Soul in Video Games. I've been reading this book for about the last week, and it is everything that I hoped it would be, and we'll explain all about that in just a little bit. But welcome to the show, Walt.
Hi, Hank. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Walt, I begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
That would probably be... And this is going to be something that people of above a certain age will relate to, for sure. Sitting in my closet with the door closed, surrounded by my stuffed animals, pretending I was living in a yellow submarine because that song by the Beatles has been playing on the radio a lot lately and it's stuck in my head, and recording my own radio shows.
yeah.
on a tape recorder.
Yeah. Like one of those shoebox tape recorders?
Exactly, yes,
yeah.
like one of those shoebox tape recorders. And the only other music tape I had was like a repeating loop of the Monster Mash. And so like I would tell a story and then I would play the Monster Mash on another tape recorder and record that as the musical break for my stories and my radio my radio broadcast. And then I would tell another story, and then I would play Monster Mash again, and I would tell another story and play Monster Mash again. And just did that over and over and over. And that was probably the first closest memory I can think of to when I really started wanting to do something like that. Because I feel like from there, it branched off to me drawing my own comic books, writing my own short stories. I remember my parents seeing me doing this, and so my dad brought a typewriter down out of the attic and gave that to me so I could write stories on it, and then just kind of it going from there.
One of my favorite things to hear people talk about is kind of their trajectory of how they got to be a writer. And by that I mean, after 220 some odd shows that I've done, very few of my guests have said from the very beginning, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to pursue a career in writing. And that's the only thing I ever wanted to do. And then they get a job and they write. And that's the only thing they've ever done. But, the majority of us kind of have a circuitous route to get there, and those are some of the best stories. You went to college in Texas, and your book, you've got this great story about how you kind of got sucked into writing, and there's a secret underground organization, and tell us a little bit about how you got to that point.
Okay, so I grew up in Louisiana. I was big in the Bible Belt, and church is a big part of the community in that part of the country. And I come from a military family, so on my way to college, I had these dueling internal goals of like I need to join the military. Also, I need to be a religious person. Right. So
right. And
ended up accepting.
And for those folks that don't live in the Bible Belt, church is culture.
Yes, exactly. It is it's almost more social than religious. Yeah. It's just a thing that you do, that you go to. And even as you're older, if you stop going, like it never stops being part of your makeup. Like I constantly finding myself falling back on, especially growing up like the evangelical Southern Baptist like thing, like falling back weird things in my head from my childhood, like, oh, well, that's a blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, no, don't that's weird. But so I ended up going to Baylor on an Air Force scholarship to be a Southern Baptist military chaplain, like you do, which lasted about 2 weeks before I realized that's not maybe religion is not the best path for me. There are things in the world that seem enjoyable that the Bible might not approve of, and I would like to partake. So Jesus and I had a mutual parting of ways so that we could date other people. And the military, however, had already signed away my life in the contract, so that could not go away. So I switched over to journalism, which lasted for another week, when I realized I do not like writing in that particular style, and that just wasn't – it didn't tap into the writing and storytelling that I enjoyed as a kid. And so finally I ended up in film, which I liked movies. I was like, well, if I'm going to be in the Air Force, they're probably going to put me in whatever job they want me to be in. I could get a pre-med degree, and they're like, well, we need someone to do personnel. So I might as well study what I want to study and just have fun. And then when college is over, they'll put me in whatever job they want. From there, I began learning to write screenplays and things in that class, but I had learned about at school that there was a secret organization called the Nose Brothers that had been around for about 80 years. No one knew who they were. They hid their faces with beards and wigs and Groucho Marx glasses, but they were a satirical organization who occasionally published an on-campus newspaper lampooning the administration, serious issues around campus, and also just stupid jokes. Your general highbrow, lowbrow stuff. And I was like, I am drawn to this. This, secret societies sound interesting. That sounds fun. And, that's something you can brag about, because why would you join a secret society if you couldn't brag about it? Right. And so I applied to this group, which required me to write a submission. What was it? It was a book report on a non-existent book, including quotes and works cited from external sources. And the book I chose was Itty Bitty Bang Bang, The Soft and Seedy World of Midget Pornography. And then I had to find a man standing outside the back of a church at 9 p.m. holding a torch and throw my submission into a garbage can, at which point, at some point in the next 12 hours or so, if I was chosen to go any further, I would receive a phone call and be told to meet somewhere. And long story short, that ended up happening. I ended up getting into this particular secret organization and going on to write for them in the publication, which is called The Rope, for the rest of my college career. And that kind of ended up becoming my focus of college, was really just putting all of my time into this writing and really getting into the joy of putting a paper together and organizing a paper and finding stories around campus to like twist and distort and turn into humorous little satirical articles. And unfortunately, being part of like a kind of an anti-authoritarian secret society doesn't really jive with the whole military lifestyle. And I have, believe it or not, I have a mole on my neck that, to people who are very observant, is instantly identifies me. And so, despite being in full disguise when I was ever out doing public appearances with the group, someone discovered that I was in the group based off this mole on my neck. And actually discovered in the middle of a military inspection. They were going down the line, they were inspecting, and they saw the commander was looking me up and down, and then like his eyes went wide, and he gasped, and he was like, "Cadet Williams, please step out of formation, please," and pulled me off to the side, and he was like, "You're a nose brother," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Your beard doesn't cover that mole on the right side of your neck," and I was just like. "Well done, sir. Yes, I am. You have earned the right for me to tell you this. I am not. I will not deny that. Because bravo, that was right." And ultimately, the military wasn't for me. And by the end of college, we all mutually parted ways. But I discovered this love of writing, and I was like, "This is really what I want to be doing." Because that's the thing about college. You go off and you really discover who you are. You're away from your family. You're alone. You're making your own decisions. And by the end, you're hoping you've discovered really who you're going to be for the next maybe 10 to 20 years of your life. And college for me was rediscovering that joy of writing that I had as a kid and wanting to seriously attempt to pursue it as an adult, which, let me tell you, is an amazing phone call to place to your parents. "Hey, guys, I got kicked out of the Air Force. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. I'm going to be a writer."
You might as well have told them you were going to join the service.
That's pretty much how it went down. To be like, if they hadn't gone through the previous 3 years of me dressing up like an idiot and running around campus as part of a quote-unquote secret society, they might have had a much harder time accepting it. But at that point, they were like, "I mean, sure, okay." You go, like, they're just like, buy an LSAT prep book, give it a few years, and when it doesn't happen, just go to law school. Hey, perfect. Right. That's fine. Perfectly valid, totally. And I kept that LSAT prep book on my bookcase for like 5 years. That was my break glass in case of emergency thing. I was like, I'll go be a lawyer. And because, it turns out ultimately being a lawyer also would have been a terrible career path, because being a real lawyer is nothing like being a lawyer on a TV show. And being a lawyer on a TV show looks very interesting. Being a real lawyer seems very, very boring. So that things...
A lot of downtime.
Yes, and you don't get to go into court and make these big, wonderful speeches and get paid lots of money. And it's, all of my law experience came from Law and Order and Boston Legal.
Right.
Yeah, so that's how I ended up doing that. Oh, I guess there's one more step. Oh, you're right. I moved to New York.
Just on a whim. I'm going to
Well,
New York.
I was in a relationship at the time, and the person I was in a relationship with was wanted to attend grad school, and she got into grad school at Parsons New School, and so she was moving up there, and I really didn't have anything going on. So I was like, okay, let's go. I will go with you. That sounds great. I've always wanted to write comic books, and Marvel and DC are located up there, so I will go up there, and I will get a job with them. I will come in at the bottom level, work in the mailroom, work my way up, because, again, this is what I'd seen in television and films. As a kid growing up in backwoods Louisiana, my entire knowledge of how the world worked came from, like, 80s TV and film. And I'm aware of that as an adult, that I have a completely skewed view, especially in my early 20s, of how everything worked. That you could just make things happen by doing that. So, like, one day I put on a suit. I looked up Marvel Comics office address, took a cab to Midtown, and with my resume in hand, just went all the way up to whatever, like the 20th something floor of this skyscraper. By the way, it was way too easy for me to just walk into this building and go up to. I cannot believe no one stopped me. Like, I assume now that, you know, they are even bigger with the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything. You cannot just walk into a Marvel building like I did. But maybe I was just doing that thing where it's like I was walking with purpose and I looked like I belonged. So they just didn't bother to stop me. And I knocked on the door. I was like, hi, I'm Walt Williams. I wanted to bring my resume by. I love Marvel Comics and I would love to work here. I'm willing to do anything I can to prove myself. Even start, and this guy, this poor man,
Luke Cage from the way it sounds.
He was huge, this big muscle-bound guy. Like, he only opens the door like halfway, and he's just like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, "Hi, I'm Walt Williams," just this bright-eyed kid. And I'm like, "I'm even willing to work in the mailroom." He's like, "I'm the mailroom." I'm like, "Okay." Well, just
I don't want to take your job.
If you could just pass my resume on to someone, maybe something, blah, blah, blah. I've still not heard back from Marvel, believe it or not. It's been over 10 years now, and I'm still anxiously waiting for my entry-level position. I'm willing to work cheap, guys.
Right. Willing to telecommute.
So from there, it's like I needed a job. I was running out of money, the savings that I had with me. And so I knew that there were some people in New York who had worked, who had gone to the same college I did and had written for the paper about 10 years before I had been there. And the college is Baylor University. We hadn't mentioned that. So we can just say Baylor now instead of the college. And so I was like, I will just contact these guys for drinks. One of them was a screenwriter. One of them was an editor at a book publisher. And I was like, I'll contact these guys, get drinks, and just see maybe they know anything. And I got there and I met with them, and they had brought their roommate who had not been a part of the group, but had lived with them all through college, so he knew all about it. And he was like, hey, well, I'm a hiring manager at this video game company, Take-Two. You've never heard of us, but we own Rockstar, and they make Grand Theft Auto, and obviously you've heard of them. Yes, I have. And he's like, we've got a new publisher that we just launched. It's called 2K. And they're hiring for some entry-level positions. Why don't you send me a resume, and maybe there will be something that lines up. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. That sounds cool. Video games are fun. I'd grown up playing them. I really enjoyed them. I'd stopped playing them when I'd gone up to New York because I was like, I'm a grown-up now. I have to get a job. And also, I don't have enough money for a TV, so bringing video games with me seems counterproductive.
Right.
So I give them the resume. 2 weeks go by, get a call, go in, do the interview, and they offer me the job, and I'm like, yeah, I can do this until my writing career takes off, thinking I'm just gonna keep working on this other thing the whole time. And they quickly discover, oh wow, we have a writer on staff at entry-level salary, and he can review scripts for us. We don't have to bring in anyone else. We don't have to pay contract fees. This is great. And I was over the moon. I was like, yes, please let me do this. And so I start reviewing scripts for him, working with developers to help them write their scripts. And the whole time, every couple of weeks, like, hey, why don't you just let me write it myself? Make it really easy for you. Hey. And you do that for about 5 years. And finally they're like, yeah, okay, you've proven yourself. We'll give you a game. You can write this game. And the first game that I wrote was really kind of my game as far as the script goes, was this game called Spec Ops: The Line, which was this kind of dark twist on the military shooter genre that kind of looks at these military first-person, third-person games and kind of dissects the player desire of why we're drawn to them and what we emotionally get out of them, and kind of looks at this weird desire that we have as video game players to always be the hero, even if all we're doing is just gunning people down for 6 to 20 hours. And maybe what that really says about how we view heroism through our entertainment, and how we sterilize things like war in order to make ourselves feel better when we're playing them in video games. Something like that. Clearly, a huge financial hit. Not really. I think it didn't. The people who played it got it, and that was amazing and great. But it was a very hard thing to sell to gamers. Like, hey, would you like to play a game that's telling you you're bad for playing it? That's not something you can put in big splashy letters on the back of a box. So it became kind of a cult hit that slowly grew over time. And then from there, writing other games and other projects, and eventually this book came along, which is about all of the path I took from being Louisiana backwoods boy to writing huge AAA games.
I learned a lot from your book about the way the video game industry works, but how not only that, how these things are put together. I had no idea, kind of all of the stuff that goes behind. I mean, these things are major productions that rival movies, and I think there are quite a few video games that way outperform blockbuster movies, and it's really kind of grown into a new media form all on its own. Talk a little bit, if you will, before we get into the writing and how that works in video games. But there's a interesting relationship that I really didn't understand how worked until your book, about the publisher and the developer, and kind of the way that works in video games now.
Right. So the publisher, a lot of ways, sometimes it's good to think about it almost like you're dealing with a book, actually, where you have the publisher that is they're choosing to, they find a book that they're interested in publishing and kind of essentially curating it as part of their catalog, and using their big system and connections to get it out there to retailers and readers, and get its name out there and promote it. And also, give the writer, the money they deserve, if it, maybe an advance on the book, so the writer can focus on writing the book. It's a lot like that with games, where you have a development team of people like, we have this game that we want to make, and we need the resources of a publisher to, one, help us fund it so that we can build it to its fullest potential, and then also help us promote it and release it out to the world so that it can find as large of an audience as possible, but also make as much money as possible for both us and you, the publisher. And for me, I've always seen it kind of like, I used the word curation a second ago, where it is a publisher's finding developers who they believe have a specific voice or a specific talent for a type of game, and helping them, especially if they're a younger developer, helping them reach their full potential as a developer. Because development is expensive, especially in the AAA, which is the higher end games type genre, the things that you're seeing on your PlayStation and your Xbox, the ones that you'll see an ad for in front of a movie. Because you have animation, you have programming, you have the engines used to build the game. I mean, every time you make a game, you're essentially building a world from scratch, all the way down to the laws of physics. Like, it's not like a film where if you need an extra, you can grab some friends and family or crew members and stick them in the back of a scene. Someone has to go build that person. Someone has to rig them with these digital bones so that they can move and animate. And if they have a voice, now you have to then go hire an entire other second person to provide any voice and mocap movement for this extra. It involves so many more people than simply, hey, you go stand in front of the camera for 5 seconds so we can get this shot. And so when and these productions go on for, go from 2 years all the way to 5, 6, even 10 years, and taken multiple studios. And so like most developers, unless they're just really, really lucky and have been extremely successful for years at a time, they don't have that kind of money just sitting around in the bank to fund the production on their own. So they go to a publisher and sometimes they'll sign, sign away the IP where the publisher owns the IP, or they'll simply sign a mutually beneficial thing where the publisher funds it and therefore gets a cut of the profit that it makes. But it's really this kind of relationship where the publisher gets to be seen as, they get the prestige that comes from curating and signing quality games, so that people begin to associate the quality with the publisher. So when the publisher releases a new game from a new developer, they go, okay, well, this publisher has released all of these other games that I really, really love. Surely this new one is going to be equally good. I will check it out. And then the developer gets the benefit of all of the publisher's resources. And, when things go well, everyone benefits. And it's a great system for the most part in that regard.
Yeah. You've got this great story toward the beginning of the book where you guys are working on this game, and all of a sudden the director wants to change kind of when the player drops into the action, and you as the writer are thrown for a loop, and you have to come in and recraft a part of the story to make it work like that. What is the role of a scriptwriter in video games these days, and how flexible do you have to be in holding close to your darlings and being able to kind of change with the whim of the team?
So those are two very different answers to that question. The role of
and I tend to ask 10 questions at once.
It's okay. No, we'll start with the role of a scriptwriter. That is, it can go two different ways. You can be a part of the team from the beginning, and you can be working with the team from conception all the way to completion. And in that case, you're going to have a much larger hand in building the concept of the game. So the setting, the characters, the themes, and how that's going to be expressed through the levels and the gameplay and the art, because you're part of the overall creative engine of the development team. The second way is when a writer is brought in from outside the team, usually maybe later in the process. So the team knows that we want to make a game set in this kind of environment where you are this kind of character, you're fighting these other characters. Our art director is really into samurais and westerns and robots. So that's all kind of in there, in just kind of a pastiche of those things. And we really want the story to, kind of be fun and light, but also have a lot of the headiness of like the first season of True Detective. So can you kind of take all this and turn it into a thing that makes sense? Also, we're going to keep changing it as we go, and you've got like 2 months. Can you do that? Is that possible? I tend to end up falling into the second category, as most writers do, because you have these days I'm freelance is why that happens, but there is a mentality that the writing is secondary in a video game in a lot of ways. And there's something true to that, in that when you go all the way back to when you think about the games that were coming out first in arcades, and then the Atari, and then the original Nintendo, these games didn't have stories. They didn't need writers. And games went for so long without the need of a dedicated writer that the narrative was being told entirely through the visuals and the gameplay and whatever context the creators put around the game. And that worked perfectly fine. But as games have moved closer to being film-like and more cinematic, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, where now you're really getting games that are these huge, epic, plus or narrative experiences, that the industry has had to slowly adjust to the idea that, yes, we need dedicated writers. We need people who understand story structure and dialogue and how to get across important ideas to the player in an artful way that is also entertaining and contains character and can't just be, you need to shoot the man and then go here, get the key. Like, there needs to be that life to it, because we're wanting to make these huge cinematic experiences now. And so more and more you're finding writers that are embedded in a team for the full time. And I'd say I've done about 50-50 on both. I kind of like both too. I enjoy being able to be a guiding force in a game story from the beginning, but I like the puzzle aspect of coming in and looking at 100 different pieces and trying to figure out, okay, what's the most logical reason all of this stuff exists together, and how can I put these pieces that have basically been duct taped together by like 5 different departments? How can I make this seem like a logical idea that was planned from the beginning? And that's fun for me, just on like a personal level. But it's a challenge on a professional level, which is equally fun. Now to the second part of your question, which I don't remember because we went off on this much longer answer.
But I guess it's how closely do you hold on to those ideas that you have as scriptwriter, and how flexible do you have to be in working with the rest of the team?
So I find, and this is for me personally, and I find it with other writers, the newer you are to writing games, the more you hold on to your ideas. There is a definite, clearly this is the only way to do it. It's the idea I came up with. This is the only thing that's going to work. Why aren't you listening to me? We have to do this. And that's the rookie mistake everyone makes. Because when you look at any other medium, the script tends to come first before someone starts building it. Even if the script's going to change during production of a film, that script was written before a set was built, before an actor was hired or a director was hired. Whereas in a game, they probably have started building sets and already filming the movie before they've called you in as a screenwriter, or as the game writer in this case. So you have to throw out that mindset. You have to just completely let it go. And for me personally, my rule of thumb is always just cut it. Whatever has to change, don't fight it unless you put forth an idea of how it could possibly be fixed without having to cut it. But if it doesn't work, okay, great. We can't do it. Cut it, rewrite. Start from scratch if you have to. Just never always be willing to change. Because at the end of the day, with a video game, before you get into recording the cutscenes and having, because you got to bring your actors, then you get your mocap, and then your animators do all the animation, and then there's the lighting and the camera setups. And once a cutscene is finalized, you can't really change it. But prior to get to that point, words are the cheapest and easiest thing to change. And so that becomes a responsibility of you as a writer on a video game, is to be as flexible as possible, because it's going to help the team and it's going to make the game better. There's always, as a writer, you find there's always, no matter what you're writing, there's always more than one way to tell a story, and to keep your mind open to all the different possibilities and to never get locked in on one thing. That just because you really, really like it or it's really, really good doesn't mean that it's right for the game that you're making, because the game is just as fluid and constantly changing almost until a couple of months before that game ships. Things are going to be constantly changing, and you have to move with it.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself, getting offended that it was changing, or that maybe the glorious words that you had crafted, didn't necessarily fit the situation?
Oh, all the time, absolutely. I mean, I still that's still my knee-jerk reaction to when someone, I'm like, no one edits me except for my editor.
Right.
But I remember towards the end of Spec Ops: The Line, where I was just totally burnt out. I was just wanting the game to be done. And we had 2 other writers at 2K who, on the publishing side, Chad Rocco and Jack Scalisi, both amazingly talented guys, good friends of mine still. our mutual boss, Greg Obi, had them view the game's script and story and come together with notes. And they contacted me one morning. I was offsite somewhere else, and they were like, "We have all these notes. Greg asked us to put us together. We want to send them over to you to review." And I was like, "Look, I'm done. I want to be done. Just make the changes and don't tell me. If you don't tell me, I'm not going to know what they are, and I can't get angry. If you send me these notes, I promise I will fight you tooth and nail on every single one of them, because you know how I am and you know how I react to these things. So this is your out. I'm giving you this because I respect you and because you're my friends, and I'm so tired. I trust you to make the changes in a way that are good. Don't send them to me." And they were like, we have to. We feel weird not sending them to you. I was like, "Okay, you were warned." And it was like 2 full pages of notes, and by the end I fought him on every one, and only one of them got approved by our boss. All the others, he was like, "We should trust the writer on this." And they were like, they were so angry. I was like, "I told you exactly what was going to happen. This is all your fault. I told you I was going to fight you on every single one of these." And you mature and you simply learn to let things go the older you get and the more you write and the more teams you work with. And also you learn to recognize that other people's ideas can be better than yours. And I think this is an issue with anyone who works creatively, no matter what the field is. You know, the work that you're making is extremely personal to you, and it comes out of a very personal, emotional place. And so sometimes any kind of note or critique or feedback can feel like a personal assault on you. And I think that's where this defensiveness comes from with creative people, is that you're not critiquing the work, you're critiquing me. You're saying I'm flawed in some way. And learning to separate yourself from the work in that way, and no longer see the work as an extension of yourself, but rather seeing the ability to produce work as the extension of yourself. So now, like, if someone gives me a critique, I'm like, "Okay, cool. I can scrap this completely and give you something just as good, if not better, that's entirely new." And have that feel like that's the reflection of me, rather than something has been written and now that is me. So that I can get excited about feedback and changes, because that's getting me more chance to show what I can do for the team, and also to get something to write something new that gets everyone excited and everyone on board with an idea is always fun. New ideas are great. New ideas are exciting. That's why, it's so hard. When anyone asks me how do I become a writer, my first piece of advice is always, when you start writing something, finish it. You're not going to want to. Right. You're going to get a new idea that seems brighter and newer and more fun, and you're going to want to go do that. Don't do that, because you're always going to get a new idea, and you're always going to want to steer towards that, because new ideas are great. They're perfect. They are unflawed by your attempt to bring them into the world. You have not messed them up yet. When they're in your head, they're a perfect little movie that you can sit back and enjoy all for yourself, and you don't have to go through the pain of creation. You can get excited about it and you jump at it. It's these things you have to disconnect yourself from and learn to not jump into that initial instinct, emotional reaction to it. So I'm better. I don't yell as much anymore. I would say I probably don't yell at all anymore. I've resorted now to if I get upset, I'll just put my head in my hands for the duration of the conversation and occasionally shake it. And then when it's my turn to talk, I'll just lift up and look at them and go, "Okay, we'll fix this because we have to, because we're the only people who can. And it'll get done no matter what we have to do. So don't worry." Because at the end of the day, that's the only response there is. It will get done because it has to get done. When you're the writer, right. There's some games that have very large writing teams. I tend to work on games where I'm either the only writer or maybe I'm working with one or two other writers. So it ultimately comes down to it has to get done because me and my co-writer we're the only people who can get it done. There's no time for us to complain. There's no time for us to, maybe that night at dinner, we'll go have a beer. We'll have a little bit of self-pity. And then before dinner's even done, we've already started rewriting it. right there in the conversation, because it's like, it just has to get done. The entire team is counting on you, and you're the two people who said, hey, we're the writers, we can put words in order, hire us. And so now they did, and now it's all on you. And it's an exciting moment, but when the changes come, you're like, oh, poor us.
Well, it helps that writers a lot of times are problem solvers.
Yes.
It's once you get over that initial shot to the feelings, it's like, okay, all right, I can make this better, and I think we can serve the overall narrative better. And okay, let's see what great things I can create now to solve this problem. And I think a lot of that, goes hand in hand with writers a lot of times.
Absolutely. And like going back on what I was saying earlier about the type of game writing where you come in and you have to just stick all the pieces together. Like that's exactly it. That's the problem solver mentality that I love so much about writing games, is that you're faced with an almost impossible task, and you have to make it work with almost nothing but words. In a game, in a medium that is almost entirely about player interaction and what's happening on the screen and the different visual and audio cues that are being sent to the player, I have words, and I have to make it all come together. And that's fun. That's cool. Yeah. Because, I mean, with books, it's the same. Like, when you really break down what books are, we just have this selection of symbols that we can use infinitely and reorder into words and then sentences, and then you read them or you hear them, and they cause these emotional reactions in you as the viewer. It's this wonderful alchemy that is, it's intoxicating on the writing side to be bringing these things together and knowing how they might imprint themselves on someone else days, even years from now, even after you're gone. Like that just simply reordering these symbols can cause someone to feel fear or love or excitement. That's so cool to me.
We're the modern day alchemists.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book, Significant Zero: Heroes, Villains, and the Fight for Art and Soul in Video Games. So it's this great memoir of your time getting to and in the video game industry. How did the book come about, and what possessed you to want to write about this period of time and to tackle a new art form?
It came about in kind of much like my career in video games. It came about in kind of a weird way. I got a private message from a friend on Twitter who's a game journalist, who said, "Hey, this literary agent contacted me this morning asking if I knew how to get in touch with you. Here's his email address. I think he wants to talk to you about something." And I was like, "I am so sorry. You are not my message service. I apologize for that, buddy." He's like, "No, it's fine. I made him read, a pitch from my book. So I got something." And I was like, "Okay, cool. That's fine. That's good."
Nice.
So I contacted William Laturco, who is now my agent. I emailed him. I was like, "Hey, Walt, Russ said you were looking to get in contact with me. How can I help you?" And he's like, "Hey, I was talking to an editor. We were talking about, maybe, looking that people in video games who work in video games would probably have these really interesting stories and books to tell about what that life is like. And your name came up. And I played your games, and like, your stuff's awesome. Like, I played Spec Ops when it came out. It's great. I played Bioshock, these other games that you worked on. I just wanted to talk to you if you'd maybe be interested in writing a book about what it's like to work in video games." And my initial instinct was no, because I'm a fiction writer at my core. Like, that's what draws me. And I'm a relatively private person. Not in the sense, if you ask me a question, I'll give you the honest answer to it, but I'm not necessarily out there on my own just broadcasting my life to the world without anyone asking about it. So the idea of writing anything that was about my life and nonfiction felt off at first. And then my wife and a good friend of mine both said the same thing to me. "You're a writer, and someone wants you to write a thing. Why would you say no?" I was like, that's a that really cuts right to the bone of the point. That is correct. You bring up an excellent point.
In ways that only wives can do.
Yes, and so it's like, okay,
yeah,
that's fair. I'll talk to. We'll do this. I'll talk to Will and see what we can come up with. And so we put together a pitch letter and kind of settled on the concept of significant zero. Because for me, I'd read a few books about video games, and some of them are quite good, but a lot of them tend to be written by people in the industry from a more academic standpoint, focused on people in the industry and things that someone in the industry would read, like, oh, this is interesting. It's design theory. It's theories about the medium, where it can be taken, things like that. And that's interesting stuff, but not the kind of stuff that I like to read. If I read a nonfiction book, I like something that has an energy to it, that feels very alive, that is more narrative than simply informational. And I wanted to see a book about the video game industry out there that was like that, something that someone who worked in games could read and connect with, someone who played games could read and learn more about the industry and the medium that they love, and then people who don't really play games but are more aware of them because they're becoming such a big cultural medium now that they could read and understand really what games are. I wanted to open up that curtain to the industry and show this is what we're really like. Because the thing about games that's very different than I feel any other medium is that we're a medium of invisible artists in a lot of ways. And that's kind of partly what the title Significant Zero comes from. Whereas a film or a book or music, the audience is a passive participant. Video games, the audience is the central participant of it. We create this world and this experience, and we step away so that the player can come in and take control. And so the things that we make are focused on the player. It's not focused on us. It's not focused on what we're trying to say or do or the themes. We have to make ourselves within our own work. And there's nothing wrong with that. But because of that, we lose a lot of the human where they from and who's telling them. And I wanted to open the door to that so that people could begin to see the real human struggles, both good and bad, that come from having to make these games, and why, even though the process can be just sometimes soul-crushing, sometimes just invigorating, why we keep coming back to it, that it's more than just a job. This is a true love and a passion and a thing that people are going to want to continue to do their whole lives, no matter how bad it can sometimes be. And so that kind of became my North Star in writing the book, of it being able to show what it's kind of essentially reveal the people for the first time who are making these games through my own story, and hopefully which would then encourage other people in the industry to come out and be more honest about their experiences making games as well. Because I feel like the more we have to start talking about that, we have to get those stories out there so that we're going to begin bringing in new kinds of people into making games over the years. And we want that audience to be open up. We want people to understand it more. So when they come in, they're making games that are more impactful, maybe of different types and varieties. Because to be honest, in the AAA medium, we're focused on a very certain type of game. It's kind of summer blockbustery movies. It's big things or small things blowing up other big things or small things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I love those movies and I love those games, but as a medium grows, you have to expand to fulfill a wider audience and other entertainment needs and other genres. And a lot of that's going to come from opening up the human side of it and getting people interested in expressing themselves through their work. Because if we're always focused on just the player, then we're only going to be making what is games that are focused on the fastest, easiest, most exciting way to get a player involved. And that's where you end up with this kind of summer blockbuster mentality.
Right. In writing this book, and you talked about taking the nonfiction book and weaving a narrative through it so that you guide the reader in an engaging way and they connect with the humanity of the story, and not just the the details. We care about the story because we care about you and what's going on and the people around you. What did you learn as a writer in crafting a story about things you had lived through that is different from the fiction that you normally write?
So there's three things I learned very, very strongly that I noticed over the course of writing it. First thing is your life is not your own. When you begin telling your story, you quickly realize how every anecdote you have, every memory you have involves someone else who did not sign up to tell their story to the public. And that becomes apparent really fast. And so you start calling people up. You start letting people know, hey, I'm doing a thing. Don't worry. You're going to look great. That's my promise to you. You're going to look fine.
Or I'll use a code name.
And even if I'm using a code name, I promise I'll probably look worse than you. That's the least I can do as a friend, is I'll take the brunt of all of the stupid things that we did. So there's that aspect of it. And ultimately that went over fine because, it's not that my friends and coworkers and I did a bunch of salacious things. It's just that they didn't sign up for this. I did. And so ultimately you want everyone from your life to be comfortable with what you're writing, because at the end of the day, they're still your friends and your family, your coworkers, and you don't want to make anyone feel as if you have used them for your own benefit in writing about these things. And ultimately everything was fine with that. But that was like the first realization for me. The second was, and I've never had this when I'm writing something fictional, but as I was writing this book and writing about my own events, that I would reach a point where I'd feel like I want to take a pencil and stab it in my eye, rather than keep writing this paragraph that I'm on. At which point I would realize this is boring. Go back, wipe this paragraph, start over. You're getting too bogged down in details or just things that if you lived it and you don't care, the reader is not going to care. This is no longer, because that's the hard thing when you're writing about yourself and things that you've gone through, is things that might have been interesting to you aren't necessarily interesting or necessary to the reader. But also that there are just better ways to get that stuff across. You have to think of it more like I try to think of it like being a verbal storyteller, where I wouldn't want to get bogged down in little details. Moving, you want to get them to the next thing, get them to the point of it, and move on. The third thing, I don't remember what the third thing was going to be. This happens a lot to me when I'm talking, is as I go down the answers, I forget something that I was going to say, or I forget the question that we started with. There was a third thing, and I'm not sure what it was. So I'm sure it was very profound.
I'm sure it was. Well, if it comes to you, just throw it in there. But what is this? So the book comes out on September 19th,
yes.
And we're looking forward to everybody getting a copy of it, reading it. What do you hope the reader takes from the book?
Well, I mean, it really depends on why they're reading it. If it's someone who's thinking about getting into games, I hope they take away an understanding of what the industry is really like. Because the game industry is kind of becoming the new film industry, where there are a lot of young people looking to take programs, to go to game schools, learn how to design and do art and stuff because they want to get into games. And they're, I think with certain things like that, I remember when I was young, I was thinking about, I want to grow up and be a writer. It's like, I'll wake up at noon. I'll never have to wear a suit. I work 4 hours in the afternoon. Cool, I'm done. Rest of the day is myself. And you don't realize until you're really doing it professionally, no, this is a job. Except that unlike a job, you have to get up and make yourself do it, even when you don't want to. And in a lot of ways, it's harder than a job, because you're fighting these eternal processes that are making you want to stop and making you want to postpone your work, and you just have to fight yourself. your natural instincts to make yourself do the job instead of just like, oh, I don't want to go to work today. But you have to because your boss will fire you. Don't. It's an entirely different fight when it's all just you. So I want young people to understand exactly what the industry is like, because it is hard and it can be brutal and it can wear you down. But I want them to know that it's not terrible, that there is light and there's joy and they're in the creation of what we do. And that even if you get burnt out like I did, working the way that I was on these games, working 16-hour days, 7 days a week for months at a time, or until I eventually just like had to completely disconnect from it for a while, that you're still making things that are going to impact people and can be meaningful and can express wonderful things even through dark experiences that are coming out in the game. It's still art. Even if we see games as an interactive childish medium, it's not. It is an adult medium that's growing and it's going to embrace the many minds and experiences of the people making them. And you can be a part of that, both as a player and as a creator. And that's a really magical thing, because games are different than any other medium. They have a life to them that is short. They require so many technological aspects to it. A TV, the video game system that you're playing on your phone, like if the bombs ever drop, games are gone. They're not going to be part of human history when someone digs it all up. A book will still be there. A film might be watchable if it's on a reel, but a video game, like that's not going to be playable. The games we're making now are going to be playable in 100 years. They have a lifespan just like us. So what we're making are these experiences that are in a lot of ways, they share our own mortality, and they allow us to step in the shoes of these characters and experience actions and emotions and things as if we are actually doing them, and have those imprinted on us as memories that we're all sharing from these experiences, because we're all playing the same experiences together at different times of our lives. And that's a profound thing and an amazing responsibility that we as creators have. So hopefully, even if you're not a young person looking to get into games, I'm hoping that you'll take away an understanding of the medium more, of what exactly it has the potential to do and why so many people are giving their life over to it. Because I really do think that games, they already are a very powerful medium, but I think they can only grow more powerful and will continue to do so over the next 5, 10, 20 years. I can't wait to see what the games are going to be when I'm 80 years old. I can't even imagine it. And that's the great thing. I'm not supposed to. Someone else is, right. That's someone who hasn't even born yet is going to be making things that I could never even think of when I'm 80. And so that's really cool to think about.
Very well said. Walt Williams, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. Where can people find you online, other than your Amazon page, if they want to follow along?
I'm on Twitter at Walt D. Williams, and I'm on Instagram as probably_Walt Williams. Spoiler, it's actually me. So you can find me there. I'm usually posting on one or the other when I should be writing, so quite a lot.
Yeah. As writers
yes.
do. Walt, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks for taking time to come.
You too, Hank. Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Tune in for new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
What in the name of Carl Sagan was he doing in the cemetery on Halloween? What was he thinking? He whirled, expecting the Headless Horseman himself to be waiting on the road ahead. Or was he lurking behind? He wanted to run, but now the bridge ahead worried him. Doesn't the horseman haunt bridges? Could he avoid crossing it somehow? It terrified him. Why? It was just a stupid bridge. The gloom beneath could have been the lair of a troll. Billy Goat's Gruff. Mama used to read that. The troll waits beneath for the fattest, sweetest goat. Jason thought he saw something on the far end of the bridge. a shape of some sort. He stepped onto the bridge and gripped the knotty railing. He felt the ground drop away beneath as he edged forward. His eyes remained on the shape. It's nothing. It's nothing. Is it nothing? No troll attacked him as he reached the other shore. The looming shape was only a stupid stairwell opposite the bridge that climbed up the hill and into the main cemetery. He turned left and ran, admitting defeat and letting the fear take him over. He ran southward down the long, dark road. His initial burst of adrenaline ran its course, and he slowed, then walked again, limping a little. Headstones slipped past on the right. He still had enough light that he caught his reflection occasionally in the polished stone. He looked very young and very thin. He could feel his vulnerability as he walked along. He grew aware of his own body, the touch of his starchy dress shirt and his jacket and the soft weight of his backpack. He saw himself reflected in the headstones, just a container of warm fluids, flimsy work for a blade or a hoof or a sword. He felt shatterable and transient, and his next breath was not guaranteed, oh no. The leaves made a faint oceanic rustle all around. The insects sang their three-note songs. Jason Crane, Jason Crane, Jason Crane. Jason sang a wretched pop song as he walked, something about having no self-control and no bitches and not enough money. He sang it softly, absent-mindedly, as if reciting a psalm. He passed Reese, Finnerton, Bain, Ekdal, Forest, Black, Small. There. He saw the gate at the end of the road. But the gate would be locked, he remembered. He would have to climb the embankment and cross over the churchyard. He could see the spire of the church above and the weather vane spinning against the sky. He would rather climb this gate than face that churchyard, but the spikes on top made leaping the fence impossible. Okay, just be quick. Something caught his ear, a brittle, clipping sound. He scanned the crest above and saw a horse silhouetted among the graves. It looked to be tied to a branch of the locust tree. He had heard its hooves as it shifted from foot to foot. It rustled somehow. His breath caught. He forced himself to be calm and rational. Some Halloween thing, maybe, for some event. He found the stairs and ascended, sideways, ready to bolt if necessary. He watched the horse, but when he neared the top he saw the rider, standing upon the shallow depression of the horseman's grave. The figure was motionless, a dim shape that absorbed light and gave nothing back. He could make out the shape of the boots and the legs and two arms held away from the body, palms down. Just a man? But the cape of the thing was not normal. It contorted painfully, twisting in the air even though the wind wasn't blowing. It wrung itself and billowed and whipped slowly, as if the figure wore a wave torn from a black ocean. And above its shoulders, is he headless? Is he headless?